Hello and welcome to another Tabletop Games Blog Saturday review. The sky suddenly darkened above me. As I looked up, I saw the giant spaceship that was filling up more and more of my view. It towered above the skyscrapers like a huge saucer, dotted in lines and what seemed like openings. It was hard to make out, but it seemed to be bigger than downtown. Suddenly, small aircraft emerged from the spaceship's openings and started to descend. It felt like we were suddenly living under falling skies by Czech Games Edition. As soon as you set up the game you think, this is Space Invaders. Well, at least if you're from a certain era like myself. The popular 80s, well technically late 70s computer game, in which several rows of spaceships slowly make their way down from the top of the screen, while you try to destroy them using a movable gun before they make it all the way to the bottom of or destroy all of the buildings, has now been made into a board game. The computer version was a lot of fun, and I clearly remember playing it on my Atari games console for hours and hours. So I had high hopes when I set up and started playing Under Falling Skies. Like the classic computer game, the board game version is also a solo affair, and I'm not much of a solo player myself, enjoying the social aspects of board games more. So my expectations, and therefore the bar of the game, were raised even further. The game is actually a campaign game, where you play from scenario to scenario, but don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything in this review. Basically, as you progress through the campaign, you change the starting setup, and consequently increase the difficulty a bit more. However, it'll take time, because the first time you play you're unlikely to win. It's not so hard that you think you'll never beat the game, but just hard enough to keep you wanting more. The core of the gameplay is dice placement. You roll a number of dice and then use them one at a time for different actions, such as shooting down the spaceships that drop down from the mothership, expanding your defense base, which basically gives you access to more powerful actions, doing research, among many others. It's the research that wins you the game. I suppose thematically you aim to find out more about the aliens so that you can discover a weakness and defeat them. Once you've reached a certain level of research, that game ends and you're victorious. The problem is that deciding between which actions to take and in what order isn't easy. You always want to do everything but never have enough dice. Speaking of the dice, yes, they create a certain amount of luck, but because you can decide which dice you want to place, and because of when you play a certain dice you get to reroll any unused dice, you do have a good amount of control over your luck. It's rare that you really can't do anything you want. There's usually something productive for you to achieve, even on the worst dice roll. The aliens create another interesting aspect in Under Falling Skies. Some of the small ships which come down to attack your base are replaced by a new ship as soon as they're destroyed, which creates an endless wave of attacks. If a small ship gets through to your base, your shields are reduced, and if they ever go down to zero, you lose. Additionally, the mothership also comes down one row after every round, but of course, if it ever reaches the level of your base, you lose immediately. The situation seems absolutely hopeless, but if you're clever and time it right, and have a bit of luck with your dice, you can defeat the aliens and win the game. The timing is particularly important when it comes to destroying the small attack ships. Depending on which position in the sky they explode, additional effects trigger, some of which make your situation worse, but others can work really in your favour. So you do have to be really selective about what ship you want to destroy and when, while at the same time not be too casual about it, so you don't take too much damage. So as I said at the beginning, the bar was set really high for me, but Under Falling Skies has smashed it. As it's a solo game, I don't often get to play it, but when I do I really enjoy it, and the Space Invaders soundtrack goes through my head and I feel like a child again. I usually play it a couple of times, one after the other, because it's so much fun. Even if I win the first game I play another just to keep the campaign going. In theory you can play this game with multiple people, but you basically have to agree what you want to do with the dice, so it really works better as a solo game, but I can see how maybe couples of friends might want to play it together. So here's to more pew 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 with Under Falling Skies. Ready the guns, power up the generators, and let's find out how to destroy those pesky aliens. Thank you for listening to this Tabletop Games Blog Saturday Review podcast. Please check the description below for links mentioned in this episode, as well as to the written version of this article on the blog. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, give us some stars or leave a review. Please also tell your friends about me, and if you want to offer financial support, check out my Patreon and Ko-fi pages, links to which you'll find in the blog at tabletopgamesblog.com. So thank you again for listening, and I hope to see you again soon. This podcast was made possible by the generous help of my Patreon supporters. Royal Patron Sean Newman, Castle Guards David Miller and James Naylor, Dice Masters Alex Bardi, Paul Grogan and Robin Kay, and Shining Lights Gavin Jones, Sarah Reed, Richard Simpson and Tim Vernick.